morning. Nice to see you all. My name's Michael. I've met a good number of you, but for those of you who don't know, I am a mental health counselor. I help people with anxiety, depression, things like that. But I also specialize in things like sexual issues and relationships, including working with people who have committed sexual offenses. So broken the law in some way, helping them get back in society, things like that. So that made it very interesting to be assigned the story of David and Bathsheba. Good, you know the story. It's in 2 Samuel 11, the whole chapter. And it's one of those stories where you look at it, you know the story, but when you get to the end of the chapter, you sort of sit there, stare at it, and go, what? What do you do with that? With something so horrible? Because we've been preaching about David for a long time, his life, and as you've seen, his life's been pretty positive up until this point. There have been problems, yeah, but David's problems have primarily been circumstantial. They've been people persecuting him, or maybe little slip-ups and then getting back on track. And then 2 Samuel 11 comes, and we have this nosedive of epic proportions. This sudden shift that you just sort of stare at and go, what do you even do with a story like this? And it's a historical narrative, which makes it tricky, because as Eric said before, historical narratives aren't there to directly teach, not in the sense of like Paul's letters, where he says, do this, don't do that. The narrative is just saying, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's just saying what was. Does that mean you can get nothing from it? Well, no, of course not. We've been learning this whole time. And God left it in His Word so we could still learn from it. They say that the old phrase, those who don't remember history are doomed to repeat it. Very true with the Bible, too. So I do believe there are very important things we can glean from David's massive tragedy. And it starts in verse 1. Which says, in the spring of that year, when kings normally go out to war, David sent Joab and the Israelite army to fight the Ammonites. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laid siege to the city of Rabbah. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. So, a little context, the Ammonites are one of Israel's many, many recurring enemies throughout the Old Testament. Here, like the Philistines and the Amalekites, all those, Ammonites are one of them. But in the previous chapter, they had a good victory against them, and then apparently they all went home for Christmas break, came back in the spring, and fought some more. They destroyed the Ammonite army and laying siege to Rabbah. Rabbah is their capital city. Translation, the war is going well. Going pretty well. So David has stayed behind in Jerusalem. Some commentators have asked, was that significant that David stayed behind? Kind of, sort of. There are other passages where he does the same thing and nothing bad happens. So we can't say that David was being disobedient in this passage, but we can say David staying behind provided the opportunity, and that's really the first thing we can glean from this story. Anytime you change a routine, be aware, because temptation is more powerful in those moments. How many of you have noticed that when you go on vacation, your diet goes out the window? Same principle. Do you know why? Human brains are programmed for going after what we like and what feels good. Impulses. When we don't have guardrails or routines guiding our life, we're going to default to what feels good. And to a certain degree, indulgence is fine when it's in moderation or depending on the context. But you still got to be aware. When we change the routine, we're more likely to do something you regret. That's why you hear stories of so many pastors, preachers, or other Christians going on vacation and messing up epically. So in verse 2 it says, late one afternoon, after his midday rest, David got out of bed and was walking on the roof of his palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking a bath. So some people have asked, was she doing this on purpose? Was she trying to seduce the king of Israel? Well, the text doesn't say, and frankly, it doesn't matter. Because tempting situations aren't opportunities to point out the tempter, it's opportunities to stand strong. Whatever happens to us, whatever temptation comes our way, what are you going to do with it. Someone drops a wallet. Do you tell them? Or do you keep it? The boss, or you mess up at work and the boss thinks it's somebody else's fault. Do you correct him? Or do you say, let the other guy take the fall? Or I've heard this one, someone leaves their car unlocked. Are they asking to have it stolen? I've heard that. It's a tempting situation, get a shiny new car, but it's not their fault. Or even if it is, what are we going to do with it? Our actions are our responsibility. And that's why David's story could have ended right here. He's on the roof, sees a pretty lady bathing. Okay, moving on. But tragically it doesn't. There's a lot more to cover. Verse 3 says, he sent someone to find out who she was, and he was told, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So when I was reading over this, when I got to the part where it says he sent someone to find out who she was, I just wanted to know why? He saw a pretty naked lady. I want to know more about her. You got a reason. What reason do you have for that? What reason could you have for that? Seems to be lust is on display, which is funny because if it is a lust problem, at this point in the story, David has 7 wives. 7. And the book of First Chronicles says that he also had concubines on top of this. So, forgive me, but if lust was a problem, the guy had options. But here's the funny part. I don't think David would have called it lust. I think he would have just said, I want to know. I just want to know who she is. But that's where sin is born. A seemingly benign choice. A little thing. And those little things we tend to minimize. We tend to downplay them, make excuses. Not a big deal. It's just one look. It's just one time. I only want to fill in the blank. We ask ourselves, what's the big deal? He's just looking. He wasn't trying to find her. He just out of accident. Wants to know who she is. What's the big deal? Well, hold that thought, because we're going to answer it later. Once again, David's story could have ended right here. He asked who she was. He got his information. He knows she's married to Uriah the Hittite, who, by the way, was one of David's mighty men. One of his close-knit guys. She's the wife of one of his main dudes. He knows who she is. Story's over, right? Walk away. But it doesn't. Verse 4, then David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. She had just completed the purification rites after having her menstrual period, and then she returned home. So now the line has officially been crossed. James chapter 1, 13 through 15 says this, remember, when you're being tempted, do not say God is tempting me, for God never tempted anyone to do wrong and never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and where sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. So first of all, if you're in a tempting situation, you can't blame God. Well, God put the situation in front of me, like Adam did, this woman that you gave me. But no, temptation comes from our own desires, our own hearts. And the desire grows and can grow and become sin. What's the difference between a desire and sin? Here's the answer. Desire wants something. Sin needs something. We'll do anything to get it. In David's case of lust, what started as appreciation for someone's beauty, perhaps, twisted into consumption. I've got to have her, and I've got to make her mine. Because remember, David had 7 wives, but sin always wants the next thing. Lust wants the next woman. Greed wants the next dollar. Gluttony wants the next meal. Sin is never satisfied. And that, I think, is why we make so many excuses, why we downplay the little things. We've told ourselves we need it. Or perhaps sin has told us, you need this thing. So push down that little voice in your head that says you can't have it. It doesn't understand. You need this. Once again, David's story could have ended here. He's committed sin, time to turn away. But no. Verse 5, later when Bathsheba discovered she was pregnant, she sent a message to David saying, I'm pregnant. Imagine you just got that message. Committed a sin, and you get a little note that says, hey, we're caught. Well, what do you think they're feeling in that moment? Fear, probably. Frustration? Denial? Nah, it couldn't be. Guilt? Maybe even a little misplaced joy because there's a baby coming in the world? Who knows? It seemed like the perfect crime that he'd gotten away with it. But sin always finds us out. And from my outside perspective, I want to shake David and say, well, duh! What did you think would happen? That's how pregnancy works. What did you think would happen? Of course it came to this. But when's the last time you did something without thinking it through? Bought something with more money than you actually had? Maybe something simple like ate too much? Maybe something big like had an affair? Made a giant leap that turned out to be a disaster? Changed jobs? Had kids? Who knows? I'm willing to wager that in the moment, when you're planning it didn't sound so big. Never does. Because when we're in the grips of sin, the grips of temptation rather, logic goes out the window. The further we get into temptation, the harder and harder it is to talk back to ourselves, to talk back to our inner impulses. The further we go, the deeper we get, the more danger we're actually in. That's when we say it's only one time, or it's only a little. David proves one time is enough. One mistake can have great consequences. But unfortunately, David's not content with one mistake. Once again, his story could have ended here. He's made his bed, but he refuses to sleep in it. Verse 6, then David sent word to Joab, remember this is the commander of the military, send me Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent him to David. When Uriah arrived, David asked him how Joab and the army were getting along, how the war is progressing, and then he told Uriah, go home and relax. David even sent a gift to Uriah after he left the palace. But Uriah didn't go home. He slept that night at the palace entrance with the king's palace guard. So he's trying to get Uriah to come home, lay with his wife, and make it look like he's the father. But it doesn't work. Uriah's not playing this game. Because we're starting to see the character of Uriah clash with David's. Like I don't know what the reverse of a funhouse mirror is, a regular mirror. Like David's the twisted reflection and he's the normal guy. That kind of thing. And it continues in verse 10. When David heard Uriah had not gone home, he summoned him and said, what's the matter? Why didn't you go home last night after being away for so long? Uriah replied, the ark and the armies of Israel and Judah are living in tents. And Joab and my master's men are camping in open fields. How could I go home and wine and dine and sleep with my wife? I swear I would never do such a thing. So Uriah is given a easy, comfortable temptation and refuses it. Which is interesting because there's not really a sin on display here. David the king has given him permission to leave the army and go home. Bathsheba is his wife. There's nothing wrong happening here, nothing evil, nothing sinful. But unlike David, Uriah is appalled by the little acts of selfishness. My brothers in arms are suffering and sacrificing for me to just live the easy life. I can't indulge myself like that while they're hurting. I swear I would never do such a thing. So David's plan fails. He can't get Uriah to do what he wants him to do. Could have ended here. But no. Verse 12. Well, stay here today, David told them, and tomorrow you may return to the army. So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem that day and the next. Then David invited him to dinner and got him drunk. But even then, he couldn't get Uriah to go home to his wife. Again, he slept at the palace entrance with the king's palace guard. So we're really starting to see David's sin is starting to spiral. Something worse and worse and worse. Remember, it started as just a look. Lust, maybe. Adultery. And now he's trying to get somebody else drunk so he can play out a master deception. But again, Uriah does not give in to the tempting circumstances. He's drunk, remember, and he still doesn't do what David wants. He still doesn't give in against his principles. So once again, it could have ended here. And as we'll see, this is David's last chance to turn around. He's hit rock bottom, but he brought a shovel with him. Verse 14, the next morning David wrote a letter to Joab and gave it to Uriah to deliver. Pause there. He gave that letter to Uriah, put it in Uriah's hand, and it said, station Uriah on the front lines where the battle is fiercest, then pull back so he will be killed. The letter to destroy Uriah is put in Uriah's hand. The cruelty of that. Imagine your spouse gave you a letter to put in the mail to send to her secret lover, or his secret lover. David's not only betraying Uriah and covering up sin with more sin, he's twisting the knife now. Spiraling, even now, worse and worse with every verse. I like that rhyme. I wish I'd done it on purpose. Yeah. Verse 16, so Joab assigned Uriah a spot close to the city wall where he knew the enemy's strongest men were fighting. And when the enemy's soldiers came out to fight, Uriah the Hittite was killed, along with several other Israelite soldiers. So one sin has led to another. First of all, Joab is sinning, the commander of the army. He's told to stage a murder, look like an accident, and he does it. And I bet he made excuses. I bet he said, oh, well, the king told me to. I have to, right? It's not my call. Blame the king. But on top of that, it says, Uriah the Hittite was killed along with several other Israelite soldiers. I don't know how many several means, but these people had nothing to do with David's story. But they died for his sin. And remember, the war was going well. The Ammonites had been badly beaten. The Israelites were sieging their capital city. What tactical purpose is there in sacrificing random men? None. It serves David's purpose and no others. 18. Joab sent a battle report to David. He told the messenger, report all the news of the battle to the king, but he might get angry and ask, why did the troops get so close to the city? Didn't they know there'd be shooting from the walls? Wasn't Abimelech, the son of Gideon, killed at Thebez by a woman who threw a millstone down on him from the wall? Why would you get so close to the wall? Then tell him, Uriah the Hittite was killed too. So Joab is fulfilling David's wishes, staging a murder as a casualty of war. And 22, so the messenger went to Jerusalem and gave a complete report to David. The enemy came out against us in the open fields, he said. And as we chased them back from the city gate, the archers on the wall shot arrows at us. Some of the king's men were killed, including Uriah the Hittite. Well, tell Joab not to be discouraged, David said. The sword devours this one today, that one tomorrow. Fight harder next time. Conquer the city. Translation, stuff happens. Oh, these guys died because they made a tactical blunder. Oh, bummer. Stuff happens. It's war. Fight harder next time. You'll be all right. To me, that's like the nail in the coffin, the last sin David commits in this story, which is, rather than mourn the loss of all these lives, he shrugs it off. Just writes it off. Big deal. When did David, the guy who once refused to kill Saul when he had the opportunity, Saul who was trying to kill David, and David refused to murder him twice, when did that guy become this guy? When did the man who refused murder celebrate it? How did that happen? Verse 26, when Uriah's wife heard her husband was dead, she mourned for him. Again, some have asked, how complicit was she in this? Was she angling for some way to get in the king's harem? Was she just an innocent casualty in all this? We don't know. The text doesn't tell us. But once again, we must resist the temptation to change the focus to something else. When God's talking about something, we want to talk about that, not shift to whatever else. When God's talking about our sin, our temptation, we must resist the temptation to point the finger and say, what about them? Peter did that at the end of the book of John. Jesus is telling him, you'll suffer for me. You'll be led away and go where you don't want to go. You'll be bound and suffer for my sake. And Peter points at John and says, well, what about him? And Jesus essentially says, what about him? If I have him live to the end of the age, is that going to change your story? What's it matter what everybody else does? What are you going to do? And then the last verse, verse 27. When the period of mourning was over, Bathsheba's period of mourning, David sent for her and brought her into the palace, and she became one of his wives. Then she gave birth to a son. I'm a bit flattened by that phrase, one of his wives. She was the beautiful woman. Now she's trophy number 8. Because that's why I said lust goes from appreciation to consumption. It doesn't want to see, it doesn't want to enjoy, it wants to gather into itself and cast out the rest. She's not so special anymore. And to think, he only wanted to know her name. The last line of this chapter says, but the Lord was displeased with what David had done. I think that's the final temptation. No one's looking. God always is. We may think we've gotten away with it, but God sees all. And I think God's displeasure goes even deeper than this horrible story we've just read. Because back in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verses 14 through 20, that portion of the Torah, the original scriptures for the Israelites, laid out all the rules a king was supposed to follow. And in verse 17, one of those rules was, he must not take many wives for himself. The dude had 7 wives when the story started. So this area of sin has been brewing for him for a long time. And I bet he thought it was normal. Because at that time, it was. For a man to have multiple wives was not unheard of at that time. And for a king to have a harem, just part and parcel with being a king. It was what you did. And I bet that's where the excuse came from. Everybody's doing it. You heard that one before? It's normal. It's not like it was back in your day. This is the world now. It's normal. What does God say about it? And there was another thing in Deuteronomy 17, chapters 18 and 19. It said the king was supposed to write and daily read a copy of the law so he could be sure to obey it. The king had to sit down with they didn't have pencil and paper, parchment and quill, I guess, and write a copy of the law, the first 5 books of the Bible. No easy task. Write down the whole thing in their own handwriting, and then keep it with them and read it daily so they could know to obey it. David was supposed to read the law every day. Did he miss the part about thou shalt not commit adultery? Thou shalt not murder? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife? You could even call it attempted false witness because he tried to make Uriah look like the father. You could call it theft, trying to take what wasn't his. What about all that stuff he's supposed to be reading and understanding every day? What began? Remember earlier when David was just looking at Bathsheba and I asked, what's the big deal? That's the big deal. David didn't wake up planning murder. No one wakes up planning an affair or corporate embezzlement, theft, anything. What began as one man's idle fancy snowballed into lust, adultery, treachery, deception, conspiracy for murder, the death of innocents, the corruption of God's chosen king. It's like some sort of horrible domino effect, except David's knocking each domino over by himself. It is a dark story. Because that's the end of it. That's the last verse. What a horrible ending. What do we do with a story like that? Well, I think the big thing to take away from this is to kill the small things while they're still small things. Kill the small things while they're still small things. Because as we've seen, they will grow. And I think what's funny is we know that. We know temptation's powerful. We know we're supposed to stay away. But we get roped in. So how do we actually do that? How do we actually kill the small things while they're still small? 2 things. 2 points to take home. 1, be a skeptic of yourself. Be skeptical of yourself. Just this week, in my counseling practice, I had a client who had, again, committed a sexual crime, did his time in prison, came out trying to get back in the community. One of the things they got to learn is what we call their risk factors. Things that make it tempting or more possible for them to do it again. The way they think, the way they use their emotions, risky situations, whatever it is. They got to understand that. So I asked this young gentleman, I said, what are your risk factors? Just broadly speaking, anything. What do you think are some of the risks that could make you a threat again? And he thought about it and looked at me and said, well, honestly, nothing. I have no risks. And I asked him why. Because he met God. That was his answer to me. He met God in prison, and I think that was genuine. I think he generally is trying to follow God. But what he said was, because he met God, he is a new person, and therefore will never do it again. He has no risks. It's never going to happen. Meanwhile, me, with my training, I know that because he said the words, I am not a risk, his risk level skyrocketed. If you think it can't happen to you, you'll be shocked when it does. There will come a time when you're sitting there with your head in your hands going, how did it come to this? But if we think it can, if we look at ourselves and say, it could have been me, the risk goes down. Because we're putting up guardrails. If we see it coming, we'll just do what we can to stop it from actually happening. 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, if you think you're standing strong, be careful not to fall. That's what he's saying. David was a man after God's own heart. Why do we think this kind of thing can't happen to us when we don't have that distinction? Be careful that you do not fall. We may say, oh, this thing I'm doing, it's no big deal. Okay, then you have nothing to lose by checking. You think you're fine? You think you're okay with what God's doing? Okay, talk to him. Go read the Bible. Check. And you usually hear the words, well. Or here's one. If it's no big deal, okay, don't do it. If it's not important, why are you fighting for it? If it's not a big deal, don't wait for it to become one. We tend to minimize, make excuses, justify, whatever you want to call it. If you hear yourself using words like just or only, that's a bad sign. It's just this. I only want to what? Just only. Hear those words? Watch yourself a little bit. Or here's my favorite, comparison phrases. It's not like I'm whatever it is. I'm not gossiping, I'm just telling stories. That kind of thing. Or, okay, yeah, I know I did this, but Joe over here, he did this really bad thing. We compare because we don't want to look at ourselves. But Jesus said in Matthew, if you even look at a woman with lust in your heart, that is adultery. So David was sinning from verse 1. Jesus took sin very seriously. And that is why you never, one preacher said it this way, never reason with sin. Because guess what? It's a lot better at it than you are. With sin, there's really 2 options. You confess it, or you make it worse. Confess it, or make it worse. You must be a skeptic of yourself, must realize this could happen to me. But here's the other part. That was part one. Here's part two. While you must be a skeptic of yourself, you must never be a cynic of yourself. Never be a cynic of yourself. A skeptic asks questions. A cynic makes judgments. Like the devil, the accuser of the brethren, he makes judgments. If you find yourself agreeing with what Satan is saying, you've gone too far the other direction. Never let the pursuit of holiness throw you off the trail of love. In seeking to do good and honor God and be holy, never forget, God already loves you. Yes, we are made to obey. Yes, we are meant to follow Him. But it's not to earn something. Because here's the thing. This was not the end of David's story. Future chapters you would see, David will go on to repent, to mourn what he'd done, but most interestingly, to continue being the king of Israel and to continue to doing good things for God. God wasn't done with him. Remember I said earlier at multiple points, it could have ended here, could have ended here, could have ended here? That is because it is never too late to turn around. There's a fascinating psychological concept called the abstinence violation effect. It's basically the idea of, well, I had one cookie, may as well have the rest. It's this thought of, I've gone too far, I may as well go all the way. No! It is never too late. You can always stop. It is never too late to turn around. Jesus said in John 6:37, all that the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will by no means cast out. No means. Will He cast you out for lust? By no means. Will He cast you out for lies? By no means. Will He cast you out for murder? By no means. God loves prodigals. He's not waiting with a belt on his hand, waiting to smack you for doing something wrong. No, He's waiting with open arms. Excited that you've come back. Excited that you've turned around. He's not waiting to get you. He's waiting to love you. If they come to me. You can keep trying to dig yourself a deeper hole if that's your fix. Or you can come back. At any point, you can come back. It's never too late. You can still make the right choice. David went too far. But even then, there came a point where he would repent and turn around and find God's love again. And that offer that David took still stands for us. God's offer still stands. Jesus made it so. He died on the cross so that we would have access to Him. We could turn around at any point. It still stands right now. Take it. Come back. Be free. This is not an excuse, by the way. It's a hope. What's the difference? Excuses are for people who don't think they need help. Hope is for those who've looked at themselves and said, I don't like what I see. But the hope is God does like what He sees. He likes what He sees. Not just loves you, He likes you. Psalm 51:17 says this, you will not reject a broken and repentant heart, O God. You may have heard the other translations say, a broken and contrite heart you will not despise. When we come to God, it says when we come to God, realizing what we've done, repentant, He's not going to spit us out. He's going to pull us in. But you know who wrote that psalm? David, when he'd sinned with Bathsheba. That was the psalm he wrote because he found that when his heart was broken and repentant, God did not reject him, and He will not reject us. That's why it's okay. That's why you can kill the small things while they're still small. It's not a matter of willpower. It's recognizing His power. Give sin no inch and it won't take a mile. And if you do, as we will, because we're human, turn around. Go no further. Stop, repent, come back. It is not too late. It wasn't too late for David. It's not too late for you. And if that's something you want, something you need, please, don't sit in silence. Pastors are here, the elders are here, I'll be here, talk to someone, pray. Because God's not done with you. Whatever you've done, wherever you come from, God's not done with you. So let's pray. Jesus, thank you that this is who you are. Not some vengeful tyrant, but a loving Father. Someone who waits for us, loves us, is thrilled when we come back, who wants us around, who desires not perfection per se, but relationship. And I pray that every person here, no matter what they've been through, what they've done, that they can find you with joy, that they come to you with lowered heads, you will lift their heads. And I pray that you restore their hearts, that they may love you even more fully than before, that this, whatever has happened, that you turn it into something greater, something that honors your name. Thank you again, Lord. Amen.